It's the poem of the day. Ba-da-da-da. So, today, I decided it's for Terrance Hayes. More specifically, I'm dedicating today's poetry segment to the book he wrote during the first 200 days of Trump's first presidency, which is American Sonnets from a Past and Future Assassin. Here it is, in the flesh. Every single poem in here is a sonnet. And his work typically engages with race, pop culture, music, contemporary issues, masculinity, like a lot of different stuff, but all things that are important and intertwined. He's also, to me, a highly language and form-focused poet who has an incredible grasp on sound and how kind of words work on the page and in the ear. And during my MFA, I was lucky enough that he came to one of our classes. Just our professor was like, "Oh yeah, I can have a cool poet come to class, read this book." No, I just started. You didn't miss anything. I just started. We're gonna read from American Sonnets for my Past and Future Assassin. So when he came to our workshop, he showed us some of his work in progress, which I was like, holy shit, he's gonna pull back the curtain and invite us in. And I think one thing that people maybe forget about Terrance Hayes or don't know is that, yes, he is a poet, but he's also an artist. He did visual art throughout his schooling. So he was doing some work that was combining visual art with poetry, and it was really cool. And it honestly, I don't know, having him come into our class and just talk about poetry shattered some of the, tenets that I held in my mind about what poets are like the artificial constraints that I had created about what a poet can be, what they look like, what they sound like. And it kind of made me reevaluate my self-identification as a poet, but in a good way, in a way where, my mind was expanded. My brain grew 4 sizes and promptly shattered against the edges of my skull. Oh no, just kidding. Jello doesn't shatter, motherfucker. I don't know what I'm going on about now. I'm just saying, I like his work, man. He's cool. And I'm excited that I got to meet him, and I feel really bad that I left the assignment a little bit till the last minute, and so I was rushing through the poems quite a bit. I left myself only a couple days, and it was to read this entire collection, which is, it may be a thin book, but each poem has a lot to consider, so the work itself is kind of dense. Not dense, but layered. It holds a lot of meaning, and it's interesting to analyze it as a poem on the page and as a poem out loud when you hear it read out loud. If you're not reading a poem quietly and then out loud, you're not reading it right, baby. That's right, sweeping generalizations. There are some poets who write specifically for the page. There are some E. Cummings poems that really, they're more for you to look at and kind of listen to in your mind's ear. But those are edge cases. Before I actually get to the poem, I just need to quickly cover what even is a sonnet. I would love to give you the storied history of the sonnet, but I'm not going to, because that genuinely would be a full class session on how it came to be, how it has been used, and then how different people decided to splinter it off, like Edmund Spenser, and then the English sonnet that now we know as the Shakespearean sonnet. It's a lot. But just know that there are 2 main configurations of the sonnet, and that each one carries a certain weight and implication and history. It's great. Professor Catling is here. I could literally make educational videos on any topic I want. That's true. I could do that, and I've considered it many a time. I get scared and overwhelmed, and I don't know how to do video editing, and my video quality is not great, and my lighting's even worse. Anyway, I appreciate you being encouraging. So, real quick, the two types of sonnets we usually see are the Petrarchan sonnet and the Shakespearean sonnet. The Petrarchan sonnet was pioneered by one Petrarch. No way. But essentially, the story goes that he saw a woman exiting or entering a church and thought she was so astoundingly beautiful that he immediately fell in love with her. He just fucking lost his mind and fell in love with her. And he wrote sonnet after sonnet after sonnet about it. Man, Dora is acting a fool. I gotta ignore it. He wrote hundreds of sonnets about this woman he never even met. He even gave her a name, which I can't remember right now because I didn't, pull out my research for this part of the stuff because I was like, I'm not going to get to it, but I feel like I need to touch on it. And so the Petrarchan sonnet is a very particular thing, and it involves something called blason. And blason is when you, in your description of somebody, you go like item by item, feature by feature, and you kind of break them down into this list of descriptions and almost itemize them. And so it's particularly, off-putting when you think about the fact that he is like chopping up and itemizing this woman that he doesn't even know hundreds of times. And so it's things like, her creamy milk white skin and the golden tresses like a field of wheat and her bosom that strains like two globes against the shore of the world and that kind of stuff, where he's like going feature by feature. And it's something that actually now we've taken to mocking. And yes, Petrarch, dude, you need to blaz off. We hate this. And so if you have heard the Shakespeare sonnet, I forget what number it is, but it's "My mistress's eyes are nothing like the sun." That's him making fun of that tradition of blason, because everything he describes about the mistress is something that you go, ooh, oh man, is this lady kind of ugly? So he's like, her eyes are nothing like the sun. I don't have it memorized, but her eyes blaze like lit coals, and her hair is like black wires, and her skin is kind of dusty looking, and all this stuff. But he gets to the end, and there's a turn in the poem where he goes, something like, "Grant I never saw a goddess go, but when my mistress walks, she treads on the ground." And somehow, out of this entire poem, where he is, one, making fun of Francesco Petrarch for falling in love with a woman and then itemizing her into nothingness, there's this genuine seed of like, honey, you might be like kind of ugly and built like a bus, but goddamn, you're a woman to me, or whatever. That vibe of like, he kind of saved that one. And my read might be a little bit off. I'm going based on my memory of the poem and my impression of it. So my computer just asked me if I need help with my camera. Knock, knock, knock. Do I need help? Anyway, that's it. That's the Petrarchan sonnet. And then we have the Shakespearean sonnet. And also they have different rhyme schemes, but I'm not going to rattle the rhyme schemes off at you. It doesn't make sense. It's not going to stick in your head because it doesn't stick in mine when we do that. The Shakespearean sonnet came later and initially emerged, people think, as a way to kind of make fun of this Petrarchan sonnet and that kind of tradition of love. There's also this whole thing about the troubadours. It's complicated. The last thing I'm going to tell you about a sonnet is that it typically has a volta. And a volta is a major turn in subject or mood, or like the way a sonnet is constructed as like a problem and then a solution to said problem or ailment. And it usually happens between the octave and the sestet of the poem, which I'm realizing I didn't explain that at all. Sonnet has 14 lines in it. Sometimes it's 2 quatrains and 2 tercets. God, I'm realizing, like, gotta back it the fuck up every time I go somewhere. 14 lines, usually divided into a chunk of 8 and a chunk of 6. And so between that 8 and 6, usually line 8 or 9, you get this turn in the poem where we were going somewhere and whoop, we're going somewhere else. But with the Shakespearean sonnet, you might have a turn like that at line 4 or at line 8 or at the last couplet. The rhyming scheme might not stick in your heads, but there's some potential benefit from A-B comparison. Let's go! We love seeing knowledge of poetry that influences pun making. Your mind is strong, Corbin. So, all this to say that Terrance Hayes is going to be playing with the form of the sonnet, stretching its confines, examining its limits, like following its rules, breaking its rules, and he oftentimes outright references the form of the sonnet or some of these words that I've used to describe the sonnet in the poem, which is why I figured it was a good idea to talk about them a little. All that said, let's get to reading a poem, shall we? Because it's poem of the day. I really struggled to pick just one because this book fucking kicks ass. So I'll share one, and then if I'm feeling okay about that, I'll share another one. An interesting thing to consider in your mind is that every poem in this collection is just called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. Just every single one. There's an index at the back that refers to them by first line, but there's a very intentional decision here to say each one of these is the American Sonnet. So the one that I'm gonna read is called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. And guess what? I even have a little something extra for you. Boom! There's the poem! So, American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. I lock you in an American sonnet that is part prison, part panic closet, a little room in a house set aflame. I lock you in a form that is part music box, part meat grinder to separate the song of the bird from the bone. I lock your persona in a dream-inducing sleeper hold while your better selves watch from the bleachers. I make you both Jim and Crow here. As the Crow, you undergo a beautiful catharsis, trapped one night in the shadows of the gym. As the gym, the feel of crow shit dropping to your floors is not unlike the stars falling from the pep rally posters on your walls. I make you a box of darkness with a bird in its heart. Voltas of acoustics, instincts, and metaphor. It is not enough to love you. It is not enough to want you destroyed. Oh, man. Every time I read that poem out loud, it just kind of makes the hairs raise on my entire body. It wasn't your proudest night. Rub it in, Terrance. But this poem is one that when I was first reading the collection, it just stopped me in my tracks. So I was like, it was just a moment of like, holy shit. Every time I think I know what language could do, somebody shows me that it can do more. And I wrote a few notes for myself about the things I noticed in this poem. But obviously the first thing that I hear is how intensely the sounds come together to drive the rhythm of the poem itself. He's not outright rhyming anywhere. He's not following a rhyme scheme. But there are slant rhymes in there. He's repeating a lot of words to create that rhythm, like repeating Jim and Crow, which obviously you think, oh, Jim Crow, I know that. Why do I know that? But putting it into a different context that somehow is still the same context, it's just now. He also repeats that phrase, I lock you or I make you, which again creates that rhythm because you begin to expect to hear it again and it kind of drives you through the poem. The lines aren't the perfect 10-syllable length that you'd expect in a sonnet, but that's okay. There are 14 lines in the poem. And I would argue that there is a volta at about the the ninth line. Because he goes from talking about, I make you, I lock you, to then just saying you, what you are doing. And then he eventually comes back to talking about I make you. But there is a shift there. And I would also argue that the use of the word shit marks a shift because the entire poem is so particularly put together. Each word is selected, and you might not expect to see a vulgar swear word amidst this collection of language. And so it can come as a disruption, it can come as a turn, a change in tone. And in some ways, I'd even argue that he's literalizing the practice of blason, and it's kind of disturbing just how he's going from like, okay, I'm gonna turn the sonnet into something physical and lock it in a room. I'm gonna use a meat grinder to separate the song of the bird from the bone, which is an incredible image that I don't think I really want to linger on. And I also will say that his poems obviously seem to be in conversation with that idea of the sonnet as a vehicle for conveying some form of love or like a trouble with love. I'm not going to sit here and try to completely analyze the poem because I don't think I can. And I think it would take me a long time. And I think the poem brings with it context that I don't understand. But that's okay. I just wanted to share it because it's beautiful and it's very layered and it sits with me all the time. And the other question that comes to my mind, even just in opening this book, is what makes these sonnets the kind of American sonnets as opposed to anything else, as opposed to, oh, this is a form that originated in Italy. And partially, I think it's just who is engaging with the form and using the form. Oh yeah, the last. Okay, there's so many things I could say about this poem. The other thing I'll say is that he starts by saying that he's locking you in an American sonnet that's part prison. But he doesn't rigidly utilize the so-called perfect form of the sonnet as the cage in which he is trapping the sonnet itself, which is very interesting. There is a contrast between loosely applying the form of the sonnet and caging the sonnet itself, perhaps by disregarding its own standards. It's complicated. The poem is complex. It's a very good one. Honestly, I get to do what I want, so I'm going to read you another one. I'm going to read you the first sonnet in the book, which also I love a lot, and it references Orpheus, who is in the game we're going to play today. So the next sonnet is also called American Sonnet for My Past and Future Assassin. The black poet would love to say his century began with Hughes or, God forbid, Wheatley, but actually it began with all the poetry weirdos and worriers and warriors, poetry whiners and winos falling from ship bows, sunset bridges and windows. In a second, I'll tell you how little writing rescues. My hunch is that Sylvia Plath was not especially fun company. A drama queen, thin-skinned and skittery, she thought her poems were ordinary. What do you call a visionary who does not recognize her vision? Orpheus was alone when he invented writing. His manic drawing became a kind of writing when he sent his beloved a sketch of an eye with an X struck through it. He meant, I am blind without you. She thought he meant, I never want to see you again. It is possible he meant that too. Again, formidable work with sound. 14 lines that don't follow a direct rhyme scheme. And the thing that's very interesting is that it almost contains discrete sections that are interconnected. And it's very difficult to pull Orpheus and Eurydice into a poem and make it feel fresh. But he's done it. And he said, let me start my poetry book with this. Welcome to my world. Careful where you step. Yeah, the last line in this poem really is, he meant I am blind without you. She thought he meant I never want to see you again. It is possible he meant that too. It's so good. They said it couldn't be done. Fuck it, we're gonna read another one because I want you to hear about kennings. Do y'all know what kennings are? So, if you're at all familiar with the practice of Anglo-Saxon poetry, which most of us are not, a kenning is something very common in Anglo-Saxon poetry, and it is when you link two words together to become the name of something else. The one that we'll see in this poem is whale road, so it's whale-road, and it's a kenning for sea. So they just called the sea, the ocean, a whale road. And things like the mead hall. If you've read Beowulf, you'll have seen tons of these scattered throughout. But I love kennings. Yeah, it's so cool. Whale road is my favorite. Whale road and bone house. Bone house meaning body. Bone house is your body. It's that in itself feels like a powerful poem. So I don't have this next one pulled up for you to see. My bad. But here we go. American Sonnet from my past and future assassin. I thought we might as well sing the fables of sea to fill our mouths before sailing out to whale. I thought we might sing as well of the feeling of sea moving about the whale like a coat. The color of water is always the temperature of a mirror. I thought we might drown our reflections in a swaying like our songs of mother wit and mother woe, our toasts with the water a deep dark blue, and almost indigo we paled from the well before sail. Whale road is a kenning for sea. Time machine is a kenning for the mind. Alive is a kenning for the electrified. I thought we might sing of the wire wound round the wound of feeling. This poem is a little bit of a tongue twister. Oh my god. Not the M or fm. Beautiful. You can't have issues with Bone House. Yeah, you don't have an exoskeleton, but a house has a foundation. It's got bones. It's my bone house. But that last line of the wire wound round the wound of feeling is, it's the apex of writing, because wound and wound are spelled the same way. They're pronounced differently based on the context. And then you have wound and round that make the same sound and have the same letters, almost directly followed by wound, and so you need to work quickly in your mind to distinguish the language happening. And then also, his first couple lines are, they almost use the same words but rewrite themselves into a new meaning. I thought we might as well sing the fables of sea to fill our mouths before sailing out to whale. And I thought we might sing as well of the feeling of sea moving about the whale like a coat. We have whale as a verb and a noun. We have as well as in its two different meanings. Um, it's just great. It's I love this man's writing. And if you've enjoyed hearing it read aloud, I hope that you too shall read more of it. It's truly excellent. And I started annotating this book, but it was a few years ago, and I'm looking at it like, ah, you little child, annotating this book, you know not what you say. That's not very nice of me. I did know things and I did notice things, but now I'm capable of knowing and noticing even more. That was our poem of the day. Bone House in the middle of Bone Street. Oh god, I love poetry.